This video is going to be over how the compilers are automatically installed so that they can then build the game clients once they're sent to the arena. So the first file we're going to go over is this python.cs, which is going to install Python, obviously. And we have files for Lua, Java, JavaScript, etc. And they pretty much follow the same format. So what we've done here at the beginning is we've initialized this variable called is command line Python. And what this is going to do is if Python's already installed and you can access it through the command prompt, then we won't have to go into any special instructions that we've implemented ourselves in here. So this is mostly used in C++, where if they already have G++ in their command line working, they shouldn't have to install RCYG SIGWin G++ compiler, that we can just use the one they already have in their command line. And so basically, if this is true, then we'll just automatically use the command line, and we won't use the SIGWin in the C++. There's not really the case for Python, but we leave it in there just in case we have something later. So then we have our static function install Python. So basically, we can call this function without actually initializing the class because it's static. And so the first thing it's going to do is it's going to have a is Windows or an is Linux Boolean values, and it's nice that this is built-in feature to C#. You can tell the difference between Windows and Linux. But so if it's Windows, then we're going to open a command line or a command prompt. That's what this file name is doing. It's in this process. So the using expression we're doing right here will dispose the process when we're done with it. So basically what can happen is you can end your program and this process will still be running. So basically command prompt will still be running in the background after you close this application, which isn't what we want. We want to be able to dispose it before our program ends. So that's what this is using. Whenever we get outside this bracket, it's going to automatically dispose the command process. So so it's not running when we finish our program, basically. So then down here, they're specifying the file name, which is command prompt. We commit the cmd.exe. Then we're specifying use shell execute equals false. So we're not actually running this from shell. Create no window means that we're going to be executing these commands without actually generating the window for it. So, you know, in the background, basically. This redirect standard output and standard input and error is going to send, so originally it would output to the window, but we would never actually be able to see it or read it in to know what the command prompt is sending back to us. And obviously we do want to be able to process that, parse that to make sure that we're on track, that we're actually installing Python and that it's not already installed, that kind of thing. So we're redirecting all three of these streams. So what you'll notice is that command prompt actually has output separate from error. So if you have an error in your command prompt, that's actually going to a separate stream than just the regular output, which would just be what path you're at and what commands you're running, etc. Standard input's what we're actually inputting if you want to display that. So this start function will actually pull up the window in the background. And then the first thing we're going to see is a whole bunch of like, so if you open your own command prompt, you'll see these three lines, but basically it says, this is Microsoft command prompt version 1.7, blah, blah, blah. And second line's like all rights reserved, and third line's just stuff we don't actually care about. So we basically just skip over it and print it to the console so we can continue reading from the buffer. So then we check if Python 3 is installed by just running python-v in the command line. So obviously, if it's not installed, it'll have some error that says, hey, this command's not recognized. If it is installed, it'll actually print out the version. So this console.write line is just basically printing the standard input that we just typed in. So it's actually printing python-v to our program window. This isn't the command prompt window, because remember that's not open, that's in the background. This is our actual program window, not the command prompt. So then the result is whether it's an error or not, or if it just prints the version. And so we're saying if the length is greater than 0, we'll print it out. And then if it's .2 lower is making all the letters lowercase. So depending on what version Python and what operating system you're using, Python may be capitalized whenever this command comes through with the version in it. So we just automatically set all to lowercase. Then we can compare it with this one string, which is Python. And so if we have this Python string, we know that Python's installed. So we just return from the function, that's it. Otherwise, we know we need to install it. So we read from the error stream, which should say error, this command doesn't work. And it should have something about not recognized in the string. And so what we'll do is we'll first check to see if we're 32-bit or 64-bit. And this if-else statement is kind of interesting because in 32-bit programs, the integer size is 4 bytes, whereas in 64 bits, the integer size is 8 bits, or 8 bytes. So we can directly determine if we're 32-bit or 64-bit based off this int pointer size. So if we're 32-bit, we're going to run the standalone Windows 32 Python installer, which I've basically downloaded from the Python site and put it in a folder up here. So you have the standalone installers for Windows 32 and standalone installers for Windows 64. For Linux environments, we will just install from apt-get, and you'll see that command later on. But so basically what this is doing, this verb right here is running this as admin privilege. So you won't be able to install stuff unless you're an admin. So basically what you need to do is run our arena code as admin, and then because we have admin rights in our own program, that program can generate more programs that have admin rights, and that's what this verb run as will do, is run the process that's going to install it as administrator. It won't create a window to run in the background. If it can, which I guess with the Python installer it can't, you will see a window and you'll have to do it manually, but this is best way you can do it. It's hidden if possible, but it's not. File name is that obviously from the folders we have over here, and use shell execute is false as well. So then we start the process and we'll install it. If it's 64-bit, we're just going to run the 64 version of it and start that process. So now we'll get down to the Linux code. Basically when that finishes, all it's going to do is return. So I could add a return statement there, but might as well just let it finish. If it's Linux, then we're going to, instead of creating a command prompt, we're going to grab the Linux shell and run commands that way. So you can see the standard input there is we're running a Python 3.7 command, and if it's installed, it won't return an error. If it isn't installed, it will return an error. It's basically the same code we had up there above. But the difference here is instead of actually running the installer, we're just going to do sudo apt add apt repository dead snakes, and then update it, and then install it. And then basically that's the end of this installer for Python. But you see it also works for C++, C#, basically all the languages. They all kind of follow the same format. They just use a different installer. So the installer we use for C++ actually will install Fortran and all those other ones. It actually runs the installer called full.exe, which basically runs all of the Linux programming languages, which include Fortran, C++, COBOL, that kind of thing. And you can see the apt-get installs G++ there. For C#, we don't actually need to install anything because obviously if you're running this program, you know you have C# compiler installed, but you do have to redirect the path so that you can access the compiler, which is CSC in Windows and MCS in Linux. So the way that we will add the CSC to the path is down here. So we can create a variable name called path and then grab it with the system environment variables in C#, and then this is the path where the CSC.exe is located. It's in C Windows, Microsoft.NET Framework, and then you'll have the version here. So this might be interesting if a computer doesn't have version 4.0.30319. It may have something else, and so we'd have to change this statement, but I have a feeling that most machines are going to have this. I have to change that later. The target is the environment variable machines, so you can basically have environment variables for just your local user, or you can have them for the entire machine. This one's grabbing the entire machine, and then you set it with this function right here. So these are nice built-in languages for C#. And it's basically the same code for 64-bit. I just wanted to keep the format. That's why it's not in the same if statement, but it could be. And then for Linux, all you have to do is install mono develop if it's not installed. I don't know how you'd be running this program if you didn't have mono, but we'll install it in case it's not. So that's kind of the gist of how all of these work. So I don't want to walk through all of them. I can tell you what the installer is for each of them. So to install JavaScript, we're using Node. So you install Node.js, and you can run JavaScript using that. Lua has Lua for Windows. That's how we're using that. You compile with Lua C, and that you can see that we're checking that command right there. This is in the main function. So this is how we actually call those functions. You can see We don't actually have to initialize the class. We just call the class type, and then we do dot, and then the install whatever language version, and that'll call the function. So it's really easy. You'll notice we only have to do this on the client because the host isn't actually going to be running any games, only the clients. So that wraps that up.